Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Sunday's Dungeon Dive. My name is Ben, also known as MetaMongoose here on the Dungeon Divers server. With me today are my three DMs. I've got Ray, also known as Romulus, Two Sword, and Milk Mechanic. Also our AV guy and all-around awesome person.
Hey.
But today, we are going to be discussing character backstories. All of us are DMs. We have tangled with characters, players, in fact, submitting all manner of backstories to us in order to try to get them into our game somehow. We are also players. At times, we have submitted backstories to DMs. Now, whether being DMs has altered our method of creating backstories so that the DMs can handle them better is yet to be seen. But that is what we're going to discuss today. We're going to talk about maybe some characters that we've kind of used in the past and how, like, our backstories of how we make those backstories for the game, or how we kind of leave it maybe a little open-ended to give the DM a little bit more wiggle room to play with. Maybe some different approaches that we have. We'll talk about some character backstories that we've made. And then at the end of that, we're going to talk about a game that I have acquired from Wizards of the Coast a while back, a backstory generator that we're going to play around with for a bit and see if we can get some fun character ideas out of. So with all of that on the side here, Ray, how do you handle backstories as a DM, and then maybe as a player?
Okay, two different distinctive things.
Very different things.
Completely different things. As a DM, I don't allow players to make a backstory randomly. That goes out the window. It's interesting how many times on Roll20 or anything, when you're looking for a group or looking for players, how players will send you their character with a whole full set backstory already. And I'm like, no, that's not a thing. Like, I create especially in a campaign, right? In a campaign, you need to establish your background. There's a lot of work that goes into a campaign, and I personally do that work. And that work consists of the organizations, the factions, the things that are immediate and important to the players, depending what level they're starting at. Which, if it's a campaign, in my opinion, should be second level. And then at that point, the background should be based around what the dungeon master has created already, right? And so you don't. I find it interesting that most players have a tendency to make their character be a superstar, like, oh, he's unique in some amazing, fantastic way. And I've never been a big fan of that. I don't like it when players say, oh, I'm the heir to the lost of the king, for example, right? Or when, oh, I have been destined to save the world. Really, not all six of you can't be destined to save the world.
Well, I mean, that's the impetus for, like, every Final Fantasy game, though, right? Like, you're the chosen group that will save the world.
Not everyone is Harry Potter.
Right? Everyone can't be Neo. Everyone can't be Harry Potter. You know what I mean? Like, right? And so I think that's why Zero Session is so important. And the backstory should be intermingled and should be it should be two people. It should be the player and the dungeon master, who, in my opinion, should be very involved in the backstory of the player. They should be working together so that you can implement the backstory to the adventure, right? How many times have I, as a player, done a background, and then the DM's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna implement that into your story, into the game, and it never happens at all, right? Like, I don't understand why, especially 5e, where you have the bonds, the flaws, the ideals, right? Those things are there for a reason, and yet nobody ever implements them. Same thing with alignment. Nobody ever implements them. I don't understand why dungeon masters, at least in general, don't use these tools. And so I personally feel that the backstory should be something that is done by heavy lifting by the player, and then just the little things, the little quirks, the little things that the DM might want to use later, particularly vague. I want your backstory to be vague, be big, generic, no more than a paragraph. Keep it simple, and then we expand on it by actually role playing the character, right?
Vague is good. Vague is a boon to a DM because you can work with vague very well.
Right? You have to trust your DM that he's going to do something cool. Also, don't surprise the player. I never understood that either, where a DM will go out of his way to surprise a player in such a way that the player doesn't envision his character that way. Some players can get really butthurt about that kind of thing, and I think that it should all be you just communicate with the player, communicate with your GM what your intent is, and there should be no air or the long sword. I'm supposed to draw Excalibur from the stone. It's fine if the GM wants you to do that, and that's what he's going to work around. But I try to just make it.
Aim to be a hero, but not the hero.
Yes, exactly. As a
Um,
player, I like my backstory to be very simple and generic, where it can be fitted almost anywhere. I try to ask the DM for specifics, what area we're in, what are we doing, and I try to add an air of mystery to my backstories so that the GM could maybe, take the initiative and use that against you, right, or for you, or to kind of just make it interesting so that you can kind of both spawn a story together. That's my opinion.
oh, no, that's good. I no, I'm very similar in that regard when it comes to backstories. Many of my characters don't even have backstories because it's a very simple backstory to be like, look, I was a farmhand, I was bored, now I'm an adventurer. That's the backstory. um, you like I grew up in the middle of nowhere. It was boring. Now I'm having fun. I'm an adventurer.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
Something simple and easy, and that's your motivation. Fame, adventure.
It doesn't have to be that complicated in general. But so, two swords. What do you, as a DM, what do you look for? What do you fear in a backstory? Does anyone come to you with a pamphlet and being like, "I need you to know about all this stuff"?
Well, I think as a dungeon master, it's really on us to decide what material we actually want to use. If somebody comes up to us with a novel, then that's great and all. And then, if we decide that we don't want some of those elements in our game, we have to, be honest with the player, be like, I'm sorry, but, you can't start at level 1 with Excalibur. That's just ridiculous. However, I kind of feel that for me, for the games that I run, because I like to put a lot of specificity in the game. I like to put a lot of, unique events into the game that are based on character backstories and stuff like that. I like to have, unique items and NPCs from character backstories, pop up from time to time. Kind of like as a general rule. I try to address stuff from everyone's backstories at least once, like per chapter of the game. But I like it when it's specific like that. I like it when people put a lot of effort into their characters' backstories because it really helps them, identify and sort of become invested in their character. And that leads to, more fun role play for them and, a better overall story, when everyone gets really invested in the game. I go so far as to generally based on people's backstories, I give everyone like a common magic item, not something that actually helps them as far as mechanics are concerned, but something that's that
Something a
that
little more than a trinket.
yeah, yeah, basically. I think I probably mentioned the beggar's purse for the monk
Hmm.
character
Yeah.
once upon a time. And so, I feel like things like that. I really like that. I like it when people get a little more specific. Of course, like I said, we have to have limits, right? We have to have reasonable, logical limits. You can't be, some like retired warlord at first level. That just doesn't make any sense.
Right. So as a on a character level, how much do you put into your backstories, or how do you build them, like knowing that you're going to have to hand it off to a DM to play with?
Well, that really depends on the game and the dungeon master. Like Ray was saying, you really gotta, you gotta know what your dungeon master expects of you at the beginning of a game. And so, that's why session 0 is so super important.
Right.
For me personally, I find that I can get invested in a character much more easily if I put a bit of myself into the character. And I know a lot of people kind of do the same. But the standard character that I always come back to, I always come back to my samurai, because of my heritage. And a lot of that, like a lot of like the sorcerer that I'm playing is supposed to be part of that character's consciousness that was fractured in a battle with the mad god and sent back in time. And so, I find it easy, to put myself into a character that's, kind of not based on me, but based maybe on, my heritage or, something like that. But then also, it really depends, on the kind of game that you're into. I remember one time I was playing a game where this was actually when I played Descendant to Avernus a couple years ago. Yeah, was that 2 years ago already?
You
Ah,
old.
time goes by so fast. I
Yeah,
think it
yeah.
was 2
Center
years ago.
Vernus was about 2 years ago.
Yeah, because he started the game right around launch. Is one of my RL friends. In any case, he decided that what the mechanic that he wanted for backstories, he decided that he was going to give us all like a prompt, and what he wanted was he wanted information about our characters' past lives. And so I wrote this story where my character was originally an aboleth, right? The old one of the old gods.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so he was slain by his mind flayer servants, and then he was reincarnated, because karma, as a mind flayer. And so he went rogue and then, was eventually killed by mind flayers, and then he was reincarnated as a Gith Yankee and then as a Gith Sarai, and eventually finally as a human. And things all like, it got weirder and weirder for him until finally like he had a just like a basic interaction with a human being when he was in on his Githzerai life, and it was just some farmer who walked past him in the middle of the day and said hi, and that social interaction just totally blew his mind in a few ways, because he was not used to any kind of social interaction that didn't have some kind of
Mind control.
or like some kind of purpose, like the no one was trying to gain anything from the other. And so he realized, first of all, that, like people have interactions in the world that aren't based on backstabbing and gain or whatever. And he started to realize, that there was actual good in the world. And then he realized what kind of monster that he had been in his past lives,
Oh,
right?
so it's like a long learning lesson.
Yeah. And so when he finally got reincarnated as a human, he realized, when he got married, and had like a kid and a cat and all this stuff, and he realized, I don't deserve this life, and so I have to do everything that I can to try to protect this for everyone else.
Very cool.
That's
And so
a very nice
when we get a
turnaround.
prompt like that from a dungeon master, you kind of I feel like follow it, right? Because
Yeah.
they usually have something planned. What he had planned for that game was that every now and then, like if shit totally hit the fan, like if your character was on their second death save or whatever, sometimes you would morph back into one of your previous lives, and fight
Oh,
on.
you'd like grab a chunk of that previous life and just run with it.
Yeah. So for like one round, you'd be like one of your old reincarnated selves.
It's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, so Milk, as a DM, have you had to deal with you've not been DMing for very long. Have you had to deal with any backstory
I've been
from
DMing
players that
for a bit, so 5 years.
yeah. So in those 5 years,
Yes.
have you had what do you got in the backstory department
Oh
from a
my.
player?
Um,
Like how do you strategy wise, like do you get anything you can't quite incorporate in, or did you find like a cool way to incorporate it into a game?
if players want to be a Neo, I kind of force them to take the long road. Like if they have this cool item in their backstory that they want, like, oh, I wrote this in my backstory. Do I get that? I'm like, no, let's take it back a couple years. Where do you think your character was a couple years before that, and maybe we can work to it. And that's usually my method of dealing with that
Kind of give
issue.
them a goal to work toward in
Yeah,
game.
yeah, because if they have a goal to work toward in a longer game, then they're gonna play through the game to get what they want. So that's typically
Smart.
how I deal with that. But if we're talking backstories from a DM standpoint, I like a little bit in between of vague and specific. Like there's a fine level of detail that you can go to before it becomes too much to incorporate. So like we're talking immediate family members. I don't need you to go all the way down to your second cousin. Like we're talking, recent life events that shaped your character. I don't need you to go all the way back to your birth. But I'm fine with that amount of detail. I don't like anything much more than that, but yeah, vague is good sometimes as well.
All right. So when you're building a backstory, how do you go about it? Are you more of the, just kind of like, I was just a random guy, now I'm an adventurer, or do you have at least a little bit, like when you're concepting a character,
It
how
it
much of that
depends.
information makes it to the DM?
It depends, because usually when I make characters, I go mechanical first. Like I think what I want the character to accomplish, uh, in either social encounters or combat. And then once I have that idea, I'm like, well, what D&D, like the backstory, like the background section, what would give me that? And then work from there. Uh, so I have this pirate character. I wanted like a witty, sneaky pirate that like couldn't die, like almost like a Captain Jack Sparrow. And of course, I went with the pirate background, and then made a full pirate background, like backstory from that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Um, so with that, so is that a so we're talking like strategies, right, of how
Yeah,
to build a backstory. So you kind of go like a mechanical end and then kind of like build back from there.
yeah. Like, what do I want? What do I want my character to be able to do? If I want it to fight with, large axes and swords, we're thinking fighter, barbarian, paladin. And then if I'm thinking barbarian, I'm thinking someone typically a bit more rough, and then maybe some different quirks I could introduce to the character to make them a bit different from that point.
All right. Yeah, generally when I as a DM, I've at this point I think I've seen just about every length of backstory from I don't have a backstory, I'm just
To the
building a
mile
character
long graphic
to
novel.
here is my published graphic novel I've hand drawn and also hand lettered. Um of art of my character doing all these things, and I'm like, all right, well, that's cool, but here we are in this particular adventure, and you guys are still like level one-ish, so let's kind of dial this back a bit. But no, that incorporating backstories into games is fun. I've had some entertaining times like incorporating, especially like the lighter backstories that get from like some of the published stuff, right? Like, so I'm doing Rime of the Frost Maiden now, and I have in that adventure, they you get the opportunity to hand your characters little secrets about them.
Hmm.
So like, there's a little card list in the back you can kind of dole out to each of the characters, and Kyle's character in that game got he's looking for the lost signet ring of his father that got swallowed by a fish. Apparently, his father was in the Icewind Dale region a long time ago doing something, and somehow a fish bit off his ring finger, and now Kyle needs that ring for reasons. Like his father has recently died, and he needs that ring so that he can claim the right of the, you know, ownership of the title of the lordship or whatever. And so we started off like kind of building his character around, being like a disenfranchised noble who's out here in the middle of like the wilderness trying to find a ring. He doesn't even know where it is, but it's out here somewhere. And I've been slowly building it to this point, moving like bits. He's a Shadar Kai, which is the shadow elves that the Raven Queen kind of makes through reincarnation over and over and over again. And I've been dropping hints along the way and I don't think he's caught on to it yet. But we're almost out of game, and I don't think we're going to make it to where this will be a payoff. But I've with that particular bit of backstory, I built it out to where I think he's actually the reincarnation of his dad. He just doesn't know it.
Ooh, neat.
Yeah.
When everything's said and done, like his dad came out here to do something for the Raven Queen a long time ago, didn't survive, and so she just remade him as Kyle's character and sent him back out there to do it again, but he doesn't remember the first time. So he just
That's
thinks
awesome.
that he's going after his father's like ring when actually he's redoing the steps of his previous adventure.
It's interesting that you said that because something that I had done similar, I shouldn't say similar to that, but along the lines was I did kind of a Conan thing where I made I made a villain in one of my campaigns, and I wanted all the players to be wronged by the villain. So I kind of did him like Thulsa Doom and Conan the Barbarian, where he's been around for like 20 years, and the player characters are all starting at second level, and how they got to second level is how they were defeated by the villain, and their goal, all the players were allowed to make any type of story they wanted so that their villain defeated them and made them become adventurers, and the whole intent of it was for the players to overthrow, kill, destroy whatever it is that they decided would be the threat against the villain. And I was wondering if anyone had ever also done something similar to that, because that worked
Um,
out really well. The problem was that you had to kind of put plot armor on the villain, because then if the player succeeded in just killing the villain immediately, right? Like a double.
I haven't done it like that, but I would definitely. I like the idea of like you're a normal like NPC of your whatever kind, right up until your villain beats you, and that starts your life as an adventurer. Because you could have been a soldier for like 15 years in like the town guard or but you're not a level 1 fighter because you're just before that point you're effectively like a soldier NPC because you're not an adventurer yet.
Mhm.
And then like that first bit kind of pulls you into adventuring and gets you like your first level or two of a class. I like that.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. I was just wondering because I mean I've done various things as well. Like I remember back in the old 4E days, or even the 3.5 days, or particularly in Pathfinder, you had expert classes, right?
Yeah.
Which
Or even like the level 0
yeah,
starter classes. They always seem to about halfway through an edition, they always seem to figure out a way to rewrite the level 0 rules and be
yeah.
like, "Hey, now do you guys want to be level 0 again?"
It was cool. I had done something similar where like I mean they had all types of classes like farmer, they had
Mhm.
like tailor, and so it was kind of fun to have the players all be like expert level characters, and then have to get to first level where instead of them creating a backstory, their backstory is literally a prelude and an adventure that they're playing, which is a little unique, and I thought it was kind of cool.
That's a
That is
fun
cool.
mechanic.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. But
So, Romulus, do you have a character backstory that you have that you kind of hold kind of close to you that you like a lot and kind of how you like what was your process for developing it?
Um, okay, I do have one that I kind of have a tendency to. There's two actually, but one is a paladin. I like the idea of. So I'm a big fan of Record of the Lotus Wars. The
Okay, solid
Oh
solid
yeah.
anime. I have
particularly
watched.
particularly Parn. I
Okay,
really like Parn, and I think that's an example of a character, and I like his backstory. It's simple and it's cool, and so I've kind of basically ripped that whole idea off and just kind of converted it into D&D, where I like the idea that my character, my paladin, is a human. He's a pig farmer, not a noble. It's funny how people think that paladins are nobility or that paladins are like knights. Well, I didn't like that. I was like, I wonder if I could just sort of make him a pig farmer. And I got the whole idea also from that movie with the guy who played the Joker, the Heath Ledger one.
Knight's
oh,
Where,
Tale.
A Knight's Tale.
Knight's
yeah,
Tale.
tail, right? Or like if
Yeah.
you're not a noble, then you can't become a noble, right? You have to be knighted. And so just like Parn, and I kind of liked the idea of a human character who his father was a knight, but then just like Parn's father had to sacrifice his honor in the name of the kingdom. And so he was exiled and dishonored, and nobody know the truth except for the king, right? And so there's the hook for the DM. Only the DM knows that, right? I
Right.
as the player don't even know that, right? My character doesn't know that he knows that his father was once a great knight because he saw his armor, he saw his sword. I like
Right.
the fact that that he opened the chest when he died and he saw his dad's old like ceremonial armor, that he was part of like the musketeers for the king, you know?
Right.
And he's like, wow, my dad was like this badass, but I never knew him as a badass. I knew him as just like this broken willed man who got into being an alcoholic and died in a bar fight and stabbed because he was an alcoholic. And you know what I mean? He never was able to restore his honor. And the whole plot of that character was that he's restoring not just his honor, but his father's honor, to discover the truth so that others know that his father was the definition of a true hero, which is basically what Parn did. And I like
Yeah.
the fact that I played the character naive, young. It's interesting how everyone has to be the best at everything. I intentionally made him very ignorant of things. He's a villager. He's never left his village. He's a fucking pig farmer, right? I chose like the most ridiculous proficiencies, like animal handling. I didn't choose anything that was combative. He was strong because he worked in a farm. That's why he was
Right.
strong. He was tough because he had to work long hours. He was athletic, right? But he wasn't very smart, low intelligence, like 9, 10, low wisdom. He was charismatic because he was nice, but not overly like,
He was friendly.
yeah, he was friendly. And he was a farmer, and he wanted to be a free knight. And so he had the concept of what a knight should be rather than what a knight is, right? And so I think
It's
that's
that
where,
romanticized
yeah,
notion.
and so that was the whole basis, was that he was going to do good, and that he abhorred violence. He wasn't a zealot. He wasn't even religious, right? Like that was the
Right.
whole.
But he had conviction, and that's what matters for a paladin.
That's what matters. That's one, and I like that, and that's basically Parn in my opinion, right? Where
No, I,
he's
I like that.
proving himself. The second one is the opposite of that, where Dark Sun. For those of you that play Dark Sun, I'm a big
I'm
Dark.
familiar.
Yeah.
That's a setting I would really like to see a book for here someday.
I'm a big Dark Sun fan, and I was always a big fan of the Scion in Dark Sun. And I liked the idea of Dark Sun had something called a prodigy. And I like the idea of a character being a prodigy at a young age, where he went and grew up as a wizard in an academy and was destined to become this great wizard. And seeking knowledge, he summoned something and basically killed off his family by accident. And that was the whole basis, was that the whole point was that he was very intelligent, very sheltered, had the like he didn't go through what science normally go through in Dark Sun. He was molded and trained by an academy of scions, so he didn't suffer any of those weird anxieties of being a scion. The problem was he was spoiled. And so I like the idea that he had poor interaction with people, low charisma, because he always grew up in a structured environment where he didn't know how to interact with people. He thought that he could do whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. And when he experiences the world, he realizes that it's not really like that, right?
Mm.
And so he goes around expecting to do these things. And it's just about him exploring the world that he's never been a part of because he's been sheltered, kind of like Kid Flash from DC,
Oh
like
yeah.
where he grew up in a utopia, and so now he's having trouble dealing with
It's
people.
it's really weird not being in Utopia.
Yeah, right, not being in a utopia, in Dark Sun particularly, right? Because Dark Sun
Complete
Right.
is
opposite of a utopia.
Yeah, it's very opposite.
yeah. So and I made him out of I like that he was part of the I can't even pronounce it, the Ixashi group, that group that did slavery and kept all the
Yeah.
scions. So it was like that, and so he kind of was, where they control magic and stuff. And so I don't know. I like that. I like that idea of him exploring and realizing that he just can't take whatever he wants. Like life has purpose, and much like like Two Sword said, where the character comes to the realization that you just can't do whatever you want, right? Like he was like, well, I'm a powerful scion. I'll take what I want because I can mind control you, or I can telekinetically move something. And he has to come realize that that's not the way the world works. And I
Hmm.
just like that idea.
All
So
right.
those are my two stories that I try to push into different games, or at least variations of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two sword. What do you got a character that you're in a process that you kind of stick with or that stands out to you?
I mean, other than me, you know, putting myself into my games, I mean, that's kind of a recurring theme for me. But otherwise, I try to look at whatever game that we're gonna play, and then I try to kind of try to tailor a character to that. Usually, my overall strategy, my underlying strategy for picking a character, is I kind of bat cleanup. Like I look at what everybody else in the game is playing, and it's like, oh well, if we don't have a healer buffered, then I'll do that. If we don't have a frontline fighter, whatever we need a defender, I'll do that.
And then just kind of go with the whatever as far as backstory goes. Like it's just a I'm just an adventurer kind of situation,
Well, it depends.
or do
I
you
think
kind
that
of like
really just
develop
that,
a
that's more of a case by case basis because if we need a healer, then okay, what do I want to play? Do I want to play a bard? Do I want to play a druid? And then you kind of got to look at the world. Like that's how I came up with this idea to play Doctor Cox. Partially
oh
because
yeah,
all of us we decided we were going to play the characters from Scrubs, and so we're nerds, but also
right.
because I decided, okay, well, what kind of doctor do I want to make this person? Is he just going to be a straight doctor? But I really like the archaeologist background. I wanted to fit a little
Oh
bit of
yeah.
Indiana Jones in there, and so I was like, why not be a doctor of archaeology? You know,
No, that solid way to do that. Uh, Milk, is there a character that you have made a nice backstory for at some point, or some kind of process that you
Yeah, yeah.
you kind
So
of
that
enjoy?
pirate character I brought up, I'm playing
Right.
in a Out of the Abyss game. And the backstory is that he was like this very young stowaway on a pirate ship, and he got noticed and recruited. And he lived a very poor life. He was very unsuccessful, uh, and unhealthy. Didn't have money to buy, fruits, vegetables, proper food. And so he had a lot of diseases and slowly dying. But he was very witty. So he made a pact with which deity did I picked? Larlock
Okay.
to stay alive. And so I set up this cool thing with my DM. Every time that I have to roll death saves, I get closer and closer to changing my race from variant human to reborn.
that's
Oh, it's
neat.
like a little bit of your soul doesn't quite
Yeah, yeah,
like leaks out just a little bit.
yeah. As part of like a monkey's paw kind of thing. Get farther and farther away from being human, the more I get close to death. So that was really fun. Super witty character. Um, like I said, when I go for character backstories, I take the class and the race, uh, and then the background, and then go from there, and then add some wrinkles that change the character up from just being a pirate, or just being a spy, or just being a fisherman. Like I like adding
Okay.
a little bit of intrigue. Of course, I have had characters that are just random people, like just, but usually I like doing something a bit interesting that the DM and I can work with.
All right. Yeah. So for the most part, in the characters that I build, I'm very backstory light a lot of the time. Mostly, like I said, I'm a big fan of the look, man. I was just a normal person until something happened, and now I'm an adventurer. Like I don't need to get too deep into that. But there were a couple of times where I had kind of an interesting like spark that moved me towards a backstory when I created a character. So the first one was back in like the second edition era. and I was reading through like the back of the player's handbook through like some of the spells, and I came across the secret page spell, which is for those of you who
Oh,
are
you
newer
told
to
me
D and
about
D.
this one.
It's very much like it's the illusory script page now spell where it's you basically can change what, but via illusion magic, just change what the text on a page says. And I was trying to figure out like who would even like use this spell. Like this isn't a combat spell. This isn't a There's not really a good way to use it out of combat, honestly. And I mean, there's a few ways I could think of, but like, what wizard would waste their time on this spell? And so I came up with the idea of a gnome illusionist who was kind of a foodie, and he went around, and the whole impetus of his adventure, like the whole reason he was an adventurer to begin with, is he needed to travel around and collect recipes from various locations that he could then use. He's changing the spells in his spell book to recipes from around the world wherever he adventures. So whenever they go to a village and they meet some people, he picks up like their best recipe for pie or their homegrown soup or whatever. And that's what he's using to fill his spell book. As he's getting new spells, he's just changing them via secret page into these illusion things. And he was going to make this fancy book. So we were going to bind it in blue dragon hide. So at some point, I needed to go find a blue dragon. Now, I just let the DM know, like, you know, if in the future we fight a dragon, just know I'm looking for a blue one. You don't have to fight a blue one. It's fine, but I'm always going to be on the lookout for legends or tales of a blue dragon because I've decided that this book that I'm making needs to be bound in blue dragon hide. And that's, that was a very good way for the DM to like catapult the party forward into adventures where it's like, you're done here, but there are tales of a blue dragon. And I'm like, guys, we got to go. We got to go to that village. I got to go fight a dragon. Or more importantly, I need you guys to fight a dragon because I'm just the wizard. But like he was going to do that, and he needed like a big blue gem he was going to set in the middle of it and put his like thing on so everyone would know it's his spell book. And then the end goal was whenever he got done with the whole spell book, whenever it was complete, he was just going to leave it behind in a dungeon somewhere for someone else to find. Like that was his end goal. Was like once he has created his crowning achievement, this weird spell book that has been completely illusory changed into various recipes, he would just leave it behind in a dungeon so that someone else someday could find it and start their adventure anew. So that was kind of like a backstory that propelled him forward into an adventure, using just kind of like a weird mechanical thing I found.
It's pretty cool.
Another
Ray, you're
one.
muted. Ray, you're muted.
Oh yeah, Ray. Ray, you're muted. We cannot hear you.
Nope. Nada. I'll let you figure this one out.
All right.
You were in the Out of the Abyss game. I don't know if anybody here has played it, but
I can run it.
Yeah, you start in a prison with a couple NPCs, and the Kuatoa that you're stuck with, like, escaped with him, but he died. So the DM, the DM that was running it, I talked with them, and we discussed in my backstory that my first mate was Kuatoa. And that he had, shared with location. Oh, I can't
The Kotoa village there
the
in the
Kuatoa
in the
village
Underdark.
In the Underdark. So that's how we located.
Oh, that's cool.
So long story short, talk with your DM.
Yes. In that regard, one of my other.
Hello.
Yep,
Hey, I
there
can
we
hear you
go.
now. Good. There we go. So in the talk with your DM category of creating a character, there was a adventure I did online. It was a collaborative thing. The lady who was running it was like, "All right, here's what the deal. You're all going to play monstrous races. The normal human races, so human, elf, dwarf, what have you, halfling, are all going to basically be the villains. So it's going to be very kind of like Avatar style, where it's like everyone's living a happy life until the humans attacked and burned everything to the ground. And so each of us got to build a chunk of the world that we were from, and then tell her how it got ruined, and we all ended up in like the refugee city. So I got to build. I was building a canku warlock, and basically I built like a really cute little hilly area that was like had like an enchanted forest that was surrounded by these thick briars, very much like the Maleficent movie style, where like these big thick thorn vines were everywhere. And the archfey that he was kind of who was his patron, was modeled after the Bramble Queen, which is a fourth edition era archfey from like Dragon Magazine, like 185 or something, and then like combined her a little bit with like Maleficent, because that's about the same time the movie came out, and so that was kind of forefront in my mind, and I kind of wanted that image. And then, but anyway, then the humans attacked, destroyed the place, and then she died, died, suffered like a mortal wound, and gave him like a little token or something that was imbued with some of her power, and that's how he became a warlock of the archfey, and then like wandered off to the town. But mostly that was like the end of it. Like that was the end of his backstory for the most part. And then we didn't really develop it much further until like mid-game, when we were in like a curio shop or something, and he touched something, and she was like, hey, he gets like a random memory from his past. Now, I could tell you what that is, or if you wanted to make something up, you're welcome. I'm like, no, I got this. I can figure it out. And I kind of built like a little memory of like a lantern festival that the forest did, very similar to like the lanterns from like Tangled. Like I stole liberally from that scene where like like he was building like this paper lantern that like floated off into the air, and then like all around the forest you'd see all these other little lanterns like being hung by people in reverence to their patron. But like that entire bit of the backstory never would have existed if the DM hadn't have been like, hey, tell me a little bit about your backstory that we haven't explored yet. And that was like mid-game. You didn't have to front load all of that. We just kind of collaboratively kind of came up with that along the way. So those are two examples that I've got of kind of different ways you can come at backstory. Just like a weird spark, and that kind of takes you off, or just do like a collaborative thing with your DM, and then don't be afraid to like start light and vague and add on to it as the game progresses. You don't have to front load all of the backstory right off the bat, especially because that way you have the freedom to kind of alter things or solidify things in a way that makes sense for the game you're playing in, as opposed to trying to kind of reverse engineer your whole front backstory into like what the game is. Starting a little vague and kind of building in from there is a good way to go, I think.
So, to add to that, I have a question for everyone. So, as a dungeon master, how open and how many times have you allowed players to do something very unique, like either create a spell, a magical item, create a race, or create a background, defeat, something that makes them specifically unique so that their backstory can stick out even more so than it is?
I have definitely done that within the last couple of years.
All the time.
Really?
I had
I would like to hear
group
examples of this.
Well, I had a group
From
that
each of
did.
you.
So I had a group that did. We were doing the Tales from the Yawning Portal adventures, and they did the Hidden Shrine of Tomoa-chan, and you're familiar with that dungeon,
Yeah.
but it's like full of
Yeah.
curses and things. And the two of my characters racked up a lot of those curses along the way. And then directly after that, we did Tomb of Annihilation. And if you're familiar with the back end of Tomb of Annihilation, that dungeon crawl also pretty curse heavy.
Mm.
But at the end of the adventure, we were going to start doing Dragon Heist, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and then Dungeon of the Mad Mage. But we were going to time skip it a bit, and two of my players who had racked up a bunch of curses and stuff between them decided that their characters were going to get married and have kids, and they were going to play those kids in the next adventure, like a pair of twins.
Yeah.
Like their parents had twins, and now those twins would be in the adventure. And I went out of my way and made with them. We kind of worked it out where we made effectively custom races for them called curselings that had been altered by all of the curses that their family had acquired
Very
over the
cool.
course of their adventure.
That's
So
awesome.
they were a little bit more. It kind of was like a mix of like a shifter and a Yuan-Ti pureblood.
Yeah.
A little bit. Like they had the ability to like shape change slightly because of like some lycanthropy stuff that had gotten mixed in there at some point. But I like the idea of like all these curses fighting over themselves, like
Yeah.
a bunch of poisons in the body,
Like Naruto style.
each other.
D&D crack babies.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They had like a little bit of lycanthropy, so they were like slightly shifters, and they were slightly magic resistant from like the Yuan-Ti pureblood, but they automatically were more of like they were vulnerable to magic if it was curse related. So they were it was much easier to curse them. So we worked something out there, and that was lots of fun.
That's pretty cool. What about
One
you
of-
there, Two Swords?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
Milk, whoever.
Go first.
I am a mechanics nerd. I love me some game mechanics, and so um, that's why like I wrote the custom races and the vampire hunter class for Curse of Strahd. There's like a were-raven and a werewolf and a mongrel folk, right? Just
Mhm.
because I wanted heroes to have the option of being native Barovians who were trying to rise up against Strahd. But I'm all about writing custom classes and stuff like that. In the Tomb of Annihilation game, both Jalen's character, Namaya, and Kyle's character, Matthew Rain, both have custom subclasses. And, you know, I kind of feel like it requires a little bit of effort or whatever, and you got to be familiar with, you know, trying to keep things balanced. But I think it really helps people get invested in their characters.
Yeah.
So I'm all about it. I love game mechanics. That's like a good Friday night for me if I can sit around and goof around with game mechanics and come up
Yeah.
with some
Hey,
new
I'm the same
content.
way, man. I feel you, Two Swords. I'm the same
Totally.
way with that. Like, I'm all about making a good race, keeping it balanced, especially if it's like specific to the game that you're already trying to create. Why wouldn't you want that? Like, I
Totally.
don't.
I'll design custom magic items all day long. I
Yeah,
love
so-
making magic items.
So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've made a few of those myself too. Those are fun.
So Milk, what do you got?
for one of my characters, part of his backstory was like a childhood accident, where he developed a lisp, and he was a wizard. So when he was casting spells of like the highest level he could cast that had a verbal component, we would have him roll a percentile on the wild magic table, which would cause his spell, like if he like mispronounced the spell, he would, like a unexpected effect would occur. So
Okay,
that's one of
cute.
the
I like that.
I've done like custom feats and custom items for people, but that one stands out.
All right. Well, having done that, we've still got plenty of time to knock out our random cat backstory generator. Now, we just heard Ray is not a fan of random backstories.
So he should get the randomest one.
Yeah.
So
Most
hopefully, I'm hoping he gets the most random of the
Yeah, of
backstories.
course.
So this particular table you can find in Dragon Magazine number 422. It is in the column building character
Ichi
is the
has
name
the
of
exact
the.
mag.
So with that, let's build us some character backstories, and we will start, of course, with Romulus, because he's
It's
not a fan.
randomness.
And it's randomness. We'll see if we can get a real character out of here. So I need just a D20, and then you may want to take notes as we go. So let's talk about your birth circumstances. So these are basically who your parents were, like what did they do for a living. So we need to roll a d20 and tell me what you get.
D20. All right, let's see here. I'll roll it in the. Can you? I can roll it in the. You know what? I'll just roll it in here.
You can roll it wherever you want. Just tell me what it is when you get it.
Pulls out the life-size D20.
There we go. Now we're talking.
Good old giant D20. Here we go.
Giant D20.
A thud.
Let me see.
Roll it on the floor.
Let me see if I can make it go like right. Let me see. I got
Cracks the tile. Oh.
5.
5. Okay. Your parents were, or at least one of your parents were at least, okay. So at least one of your parents, if not both of them, were spies.
Oh,
neat.
Okay.
So we're gonna next determine your siblings, like how many you have or what they were, and then from there, because your parents were spies, we're gonna roll on a different table than normal, because they go to a special section of this map. So roll a d20 and we'll figure out what kind of siblings you got.
14.
14. You have 3 siblings, so you are somewhere, maybe the oldest, maybe the middle of 4 kids.
Okay.
So, because your parents were spies, instead of heading out like normal, it turns out you were hired to spy, because it's a family affair.
Mm-hmm.
And I need you to roll a d20, and we'll find out what happened to you.
7.
7. The target of your spying mission is a friend. You betray your employers and try to help your friend instead. So we're going to roll on the table a friend in need.
8.
8. Your friend needs your help to rescue a member of your family who is slated for execution. You succeed, but you are now wanted by the authorities. We are going to get to roll on the table on the run.
Oh, how many stars did you get?
I know. Here we go.
We're about to find out.
He got 3 stars. He shot at a cop car.
18.
18. You vanish without a trace. Your pursuers give up for now. Your life as an adventurer begins.
So 0 stars currently.
You are a spy, or at least were a spy.
Yeah.
Then you were asked to spy on a friend, but it turns out you turned on your employers.
Yeah.
Because and somehow that involved one of your family members, maybe your parents or one of your siblings, being up for execution. You definitely helped them get away, and you are now on the run. And theoretically, your pursuers have given up for now.
That's a great story, actually. That works out really well.
So consider what kind of character that turns into. I mean, that's leaning very heavy rogue, but it may not. But just consider that. And we'll move on to Two Swords. So let's tell me about your parents. Let's roll a d20.
Okay, first roll is an 8.
An 8. Your parents were farmers.
Rice farmers.
So you're farm folk. Roll on the next table, siblings. Let's see if you got any.
Another 8.
Another 8. You have 2 sisters. They may be older than you. You may be the middle one. Who knows? But eventually you got tired of this whole farm thing, and it was time to leave home. So let's roll on the leaving home table.
14.
14. Oh, no. Your family is ruined financially and blacklisted by a rival. So apparently there's some drama in the farm world that you exist in. You are forced to leave home and take up a life of crime to survive. We're going to roll on the crime table to see what kind of criminal you become, and then roll on the Thieves Guild table after that. So let's go to the crime table. So what kind
Crime
of
table
crime
is
did
a
you
nat 20.
A nat 20. Oh no, you impersonated a noble. That's your crime of choice.
That's not good.
All right, so let's go to the Thieves Guild to see how they feel about that.
Thieves Guild is an 18.
An 18. You pull many cunning heists and gain a reputation as a great thief under an assumed name, potentially a noble name. Eventually, the authorities catch up to you, but they don't throw you in prison. Instead, in recompense for your crimes, they want you to spy for them. You now get to roll on the hired to spy table.
Oh boy. 12.
12. Your spying reveals a conspiracy, but you don't have all the pieces. You set about finding the information that might reveal the truth. We get to roll on the seeking table to see what happens.
Okay.
Oh, that's not bad. That's good.
9.
9. In your search, you stumble over the activities of a villain who is offended by your investigations. You get to roll on the villain table to see what that villain is, and then on the run table to find out what happens afterwards.
Oh man, I hope it's a necromancer.
So to the villain table.
Necromancer.
Necromancer.
Villain is 6.
Necromancer.
6 is a warlord.
Aw.
Ooh, that's good.
Still
Warlord's
good, but
though.
not a necromancer.
Yeah.
He might be a necromantic warlord. And
And
then on
on the run. Yep.
Natural 1.
A natural 1. Your pursuers capture you and sell you into slavery. We're going to go to the enslaved table.
I vanished, dude.
I got an 8.
An 8. You lead a slave revolt that is brutally crushed. You serve a few years in chains, despised by many slaves and mocked by your captors. You get to roll this table again.
Oh,
You've been busy,
13.
Russell.
What was it?
13.
13. You try again. You lead a slave revolt, but this time, as you flee with your fellows, fate moves against you. We're going to roll on the waylaid table to see what happens.
Oh boy, brutal. 17.
17. A fey creature entices you into the Feywild for years. But to you, the visit seems to last only a few days. Your life as an adventurer begins after you leave the Feywild.
Oh, that's pretty cool, man. That's a good background.
Yeah,
That's not a backstory. That's a
pretty good.
full life story.
Yeah, that's a life story. It's good.
So with that, maybe you came out as a Fey Pact warlock at the end. Who knows? We'll see.
We went from
but that's
farmer
your,
to rogue to gladiator.
There's limitless potential here.
There's a lot of potential there. All right, Milk, tell me your tale. Who are your parents?
All right. 7.
7. At least one of your parents was a healer of some kind, maybe a cleric or a medic. So you have that kind of running in your background. How many siblings you got?
11.
11. You have 2 stepsisters. So apparently there was a divorce in your family at some point, or a widow situation.
Yeah.
So there was either a death or a divorce in your family at some point, because now you have 2 stepsisters.
We'll go with death for tragedy purposes.
Sure. Let's see what you got on the leaving home table.
13.
You're kind of old enough to head on out. 13. Apparently you were press ganged by pirates at some point. So we're going to roll on the press ganged table and see where that takes you.
All right. Rolling. 15.
15. You get duty in the crow's nest. I need you to make me a perception check, which is just a d20, and just tell me what you get. If you succeed, you gain training in perception and your life begins. But if you fail, the ship will run aground, and you are considered bad luck and put ashore, and then your life as an adventurer begins.
You're the lookout. You're the lookout.
So you got a 15.
15.
So you are well trained in perceiving things, and your life as an adventurer will begin after a successful stint at sea.
Oh, that's cool.
You are not randomly abandoned on an island.
That sounds way more interesting.
You can do anything you want with that.
Sitting in the crow's nest, just grab a fork and stab my eye before I'm supposed to start looking.
But anyway, so yeah, those are some backstories. I'll give it a spin for me here. We'll see how I do. So table 1, birth circumstances. How did I end up? I got a 16, and a 16 is I start as a noble.
Get impersonated by Ken.
Probably. Maybe that's how I know him. Maybe we traveled in the same circles at some point.
Watch, you're gonna end up with a slave revolt.
Do I have any siblings? I have rolled a
he
1.
crushed the slave revolt.
And a 1 says that I have no siblings. So I am, I guess, the scion of my noble house.
The lonely only child.
Now I'm leaving home. So where does that get me? I rolled a 3. I was sent away for tutelage. I get to roll on the tutelage table. Rolling on that, I got a 10. I apprentice to a great craftsmaker or artist. I get to roll on table 12.
That's cool.
Person to see what happens to my tutor. Because it may not have gone well. I got a 1. My tutor is killed by sturges. My life as an adventurer begins, or alternatively, I can roll on the tavern brawl to see what happens when I try to drown my sorrows with drink. I think I'm going to do that.
Yeah, do that.
Let's see what happens when I had a tutor. He was really cool. We were friends, and then somehow he got killed by giant monster mosquitoes. And now I get to.
It's a horrible way to die because they suck your blood out.
I get to go get drunk on table 23, Tavern Brawl. And I rolled a 4. I am unconscious on the floor when the watch arrives. I am arrested. I get imprisoned. So I'm going to roll on the imprisoned table. So table 21, the imprisoned table. I rolled a 19. I become the prisoner's leader, though connections with people on the through connections with people on the outside, my criminal followers arrange for an early release, and I have money in my pocket when I get out. I gain training in Intimidate and what was in 4th edition Streetwise, and my life as an adventurer begins.
Which would be
so I was a noble that went to go get trained to do some stuff. My teacher got killed by mosquito bats, and then I got really drunk and thrown in jail where I made a bunch of criminal friends at some point. So that's cool. But no, I've got a request here to repeat where the tables being used can be found. These can be found in Dragon Magazine number 422. It is the April 2013 edition of Dragon Magazine. It was for the column in the magazine Building Character, where they gave you a background character generator. Just so you know, this generator has a total of 34 tables.
That's a lot of tables.
That's a lot of tables.
It's about the number of the random character or the random background generator in Xanathar's guide, I think.
But no, it's table 1, birth circumstances. Then table 2 is siblings. 3 is leaving home. 4 is tutelage. 5 is villain. 6 is mercantile matters. 7 is cursed. 8 is arrival, so you arrive somewhere. 9 is vendetta. 10 is wizard's tower. If you wander into a wizard's tower.
The surface of this one.
11 is seeking.
I have to say that it would be interesting if we held another session and we should make characters based off this.
Yes.
I'm telling you, man. These
maybe even do a one shot.
As a quick aside, well, maybe not. Well, a slightly quick aside. So I've used this before. My wife ran a game during the fourth ed era for my friends, and we all used this backstory generator to build characters. So what I ended up with in that game was I knew already that I was going to be a warforged fighter. Like that was my end point. So it didn't matter what my backstory was up to there. My end point was that I was going to be a warforged fighter. Um, it turns out that originally following my and then like reverse engineering from my backstory, he was effectively a human who went to go learn how to be a wizard, but he was really bad at it and accidentally transmuted his soul into a suit of armor via, very Full Metal Alchemist style. And then he went to go work for a caravan, did a really crap job at that. So they left, like he fell asleep on the job and they left him behind. So he was kind of like a failed caravan guard. But that's like how he met up with the other players, was they had also kind of worked for the caravan. But it turns out like I decided that since he was a fighter, but he always wanted to be a wizard to begin with, he was a fighter that fought with like a quarterstaff. So like that was his weapon of choice, because that was that's what wizards used, and he was going to be a wizard someday, but he failed at it. So he was like a failed wizard, a failed caravan guard, accidentally turned his soul into a suit of armor, and now he's just like a basic level fighter for this group of adventurers, and that was kind of how this table kind of shaped that character.
Yeah, man, it's cool. It's I'm not a big fan fan of randomness, but that's I don't think it's crazy. Like I've seen some that are really like some tables that are just like completely
there.
Oh
wacky
yeah.
and random. This one doesn't seem too bad.
No, this one leaves a lot of
Yeah,
openings for like DMs to kind of fit space in, and it's just vague enough in places where it doesn't become like horribly intrusive into a game. Like your character just happened to be in prison for a little while. That happens. Or, or you were enslaved for a bit, but you've got some slave rebellions under your belt at this point. I mean, they probably weren't big slave rebellions. Like that's the you're like, oh, big slave rebellion. Well, like that's how the Out of the Abyss starts, right? Like
Yeah.
you're all drow slaves, and you have
Yeah.
to do a slave rebellion to get out. That doesn't so bad when you think about it. In the as far as backstory stuff goes, like yeah, maybe you were captured by drow and you led a slave rebellion to escape. Um, but yeah, so this is kind of like that backstory game. It's lots of fun. It's a good way to kind of build up some characters, or kind of build like a side backstory for your characters if you need like a little push in
yeah,
that direction.
because some people definitely do have problems with backgrounds. I tell you.
I'd love to play with the
And
characters.
at some point, like just and to throw it out there, like we were discussing last week, how as a DM it's good to hoard things from
Mhm.
previous like when it comes to getting information for stuff. Like I have this because I had access to all those dragon magazines and dungeon magazines, and so if ever I need, like, even though it's built for fourth edition, so like it gives you like skills, like it's to help you kind of like pick your skills as you go, you can ignore that part. It's not
Yeah,
important for
yeah,
the
it's not
but like
important at
the
all.
backstory that you generate is what's important. So that even though it's like a thing for an older edition, it's still very useful today. So
I use fourth
things
edition
like,
stuff all the time,
right.
or 2E
No,
stuff all the time.
yeah, I love digging through old edition material. Yeah, um, and just stealing it for my games for now. And so if you get a hold of, as a DM, if you get a hold of these resources, hoard them, keep them. They will always be useful to you one way or another.
Yep. Well said. Yeah.
But anything beyond that, any closing statements before we start doing the end wrap up? Any words of wisdom?
Not from me.
Now, check it out. In the end, I think as a dungeon master, you just got to find your groove and whatever works best for you, right? Like again, we're all different and we all like certain things. I prefer more realistic, gritty, non-magical things. And so that's where the direction of my backstory, it's what I allow from players, depending what campaign I'm running. And you should stay open to those things, right? Like it's all about keeping players involved in your game and having a relationship with your players. Uh, if there's anything that Adventure League did badly is that the uniqueness of your character is sort of gone. It bleeds into the background because there's not enough time. And one of the benefits of being able to run a campaign where it's a homebrew and it's you and your players and hopefully your friends one day, so that you could make something grand and interesting and unique. So yeah.
Mhm. All right. Well, with that aside, end of show wrap up stuff. Importantly, if you, we are, by my current count, 7 followers away from our goal of 100, which will get us to a giveaway. We are giving away, from what I'm told, a player's handbook
Second
signed
gen.
by one, huh? Second edition, right?
Yep.
Second edition player's handbook, signed by one Gary Gygax. So that's cool. And then on top of that, uh, we're always looking for more subscribers in addition to following. If you have Amazon Prime, good news, you have a free Twitch Prime sub to throw out there. If you send it our way, that's great. It's free for you. It helps to support us. The more support we get, the cooler things we can give to you. On top of that, if you just want to send a follow or a subscribe our way anyway, also great. Like I said, it's very helpful all around. Otherwise, we have a Discord server. We hang out there and do a lot of gaming on during the week. Feel free to stop by and hang out with us.
Cool. Awesome.
But
We'll see
otherwise,
you. We'll see you on Tuesday for Tuesday of Annihilation.
all right. Yeah, the Tuesday of Annihilation game is really fun to watch, guys. Definitely stop by and see that.
Yep.
See you on Tuesday.